Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens, and this is Carly Stevens Books for all things writing, publishing, and indie author life. And today I have James Persichetti with me. Today I'm very excited to pick your brain. So thanks for being on the channel.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So James is a writer, a freelance editor, and language enthusiast who enjoys writing about queer characters going on adventures. He earned an English degree, so we have that in common. We're buddies. And he studied Arthurian legends, where he drew inspiration for his debut graphic novel, A Tale of Two Nights. He lives with his husband in Denver, Colorado. So I am so excited to get into today's topic of graphic novels. It's been this big mysterious thing for me for a long time. Can you tell us a little bit about your graphic novel that is coming out soon? Or actually,
Yeah,
by the time this airs, it will have just come out. So, can you tell us a
perfect.
bit
Yeah,
about it?
sure. So this is a graphic novel. It is Tristan and Lancelot, A Tale of Two Nights. It's written by me and it is illustrated by L.S. Biehler. It is a queer reimagining of Arthurian legends. So we took some of like the classic stories that you know, like Lancelot and Tristan and Isolde, but we put our own modern kind of queer spin on it. It's got a gay romance at the center. The basic like pitch for it is that when Merlin goes missing, Arthur sends his estranged half-sister, Morgan Le Fay, who is a mercenary mage, on a quest to go find Merlin. But she is accompanied by two knights, much to her dismay, Tristan and Lancelot, who join her on this quest. They've got like secrets and differences they have to work through, and there's a little bit of like romantic sparks that will fly between the two knights along the way.
All right. It sounds fantastic. It's actually sitting in my Amazon cart right now. I'm kind of just
Mhm.
waiting to gather a few more things, but it sounds
Yeah.
charming. So, how did you first get into writing?
So I'm one of those really annoying writers who are like, oh, I've always wanted to be a writer. Like ever since I was a kid, my earliest memories kind of a thing.
How is that annoying? That's the story for quite a few of
Bowen
us.
Bowen Gillings finds it annoying. It's so funny talking to him about it because he's like, oh, people who've been writing their whole lives. Um, yeah, I remember in first grade, like sitting down at the desk and asking my teacher like every single day, like, are you going to teach us to write today? I'm like, we're
Oh,
talking
wow.
about like the ABCs, right? But I was like, I wanted to learn how to write. I have no idea why. And then I remember the day she looked at me and she's like, today I'm going to teach you how to write. And I was so excited. Um, and then when I like kind of got the hang of it in first grade, I wrote my first little like picture book. It was a story about my stuffed animal tiger, Jaws, who went on an adventure. He like built a time machine and went back in time to see the dinosaurs. I think I just like read Magic Treehouse at the time. And I like typed it up. I like did crayon colored illustrations, and the librarian in my elementary school put it in the library for like 2 weeks, which was like the coolest thing when I was in first grade.
I think
And
that's the
then,
coolest thing for anybody to see your work
yeah,
in a library. How special.
yeah, and like one kid checked it out, and I was terrified because it was my only copy. I was terrified that it would never come back. But I still have it. It's on my bookshelf, like this little crayon drawn story. So yeah, I've been writing ever since. Just novels, fantasy, adventure, a little bit of romance, kind of a whole mixed bag of things.
Hmm. Yeah, it sounds like a Calvin and Hobbes-esque
Yeah.
story. That's that's great. So you mentioned that you write novels and other styles of story besides graphic novels. So how was writing a graphic novel different than writing a short story or novella or a novel? Like what were some new considerations for that medium?
Yeah. I've always been writing novels, kind of that's always been my focus, in prose. And so I learned a lot of the rules of how do you write prose. And it's like the rules that we all, like all of us who are writers, have heard. Stuff like show, don't tell, and scene descriptions, and all these things. And so I had written several novels by the time we actually switched and my agent had this idea of putting together a graphic novel. and I had to unlearn so much of what I learned with prose because a graphic novel, I was writing a script, and it's a lot like if you're writing a movie script. So you've kind of very stark, like scene description, dialogue, and like a little bit of character action if it's necessary. So
Mm.
the prose writer in me wanted to go into these like descriptive, like in-depth details about the setting, or like I wanted to show character emotions and all this because it's what I've been trained to do. And I realized that you have to strip a lot of that back. Um, when you're writing a novel, you want to communicate the story directly to your reader. When you're writing a graphic novel script, you want to communicate the story clearly to your illustrator,
Mm.
and then your illustrator is conveying that through art to your reader. So things like, Lancelot raised an eyebrow or like looked off in the distance or all these things, I had to like I would type it out and be like delete, delete, delete. Lancelot looks confused, like very simple, so that my illustrator had the freedom that she needed to kind of stage these characters through her own vision. So I had to learn to not like micromanage her. Um, yeah, so it was a very different kind of like, I felt like I was cheating. It's just like Lancelot looks angry. That's like you're not supposed to write something that like plain and cut and dry in prose,
Mm.
but I had to do that for the script. So a lot of like conventions and stuff I had to relearn, and I think that it's a lot more similar to if you're writing a screenplay as opposed to a novel.
You can get a lot of that emotion, you can still show a lot of that emotion through the dialogue in your script. I
Hmm.
imagine you just had to really dig into some of those, like you say, prose elements that you actually did have that
Right.
full command of.
Hmm.
But that would be a very different switch. Had you written a script before, of any kind?
Only for fun, only for myself. I had never actually written a script that was meant to be turned into anything. I loved Shakespeare in high school and college, and so at one point I tried my hand at writing a little bit of a Shakespearean play. I think I wrote like two scenes, um, which I think having done a little bit of that helped prepare me to write a graphic novel script, especially because Shakespearean scripts have no scene description or action. It's just straight dialogue, and that's how you convey the whole story. So I think having a little bit of practice with that was helpful as a foundation.
Yeah, I kinda love that about Shakespeare, though. People who have watched the channel know how obsessed I am with Hamlet and some other plays
Yeah,
and the freedom that there is, like, in between the lines, but in this case,
yeah,
it was your lines and other people were having that freedom in between. So you mentioned that you
yeah.
had an agent, and it was the agent who kind of paired you with this project almost, which is a very unorthodox path.
Hmm.
What was that process like? Like, did you come up with this story and have to pitch a synopsis, or how did that go?
Yeah, so I had written several novels, some of them that I like tried to put out there, didn't really get much success with it. But I was also working for a literary agency at the time. And I had met my current agent, Danielle Burby, through the agency that I was working at. And I sent her a manuscript kind of in a um, unofficial capacity to be like, hey, could you look this over and just tell me what you think? Um, and she did, and she gave me her response, but it was basically like, this is not a manuscript that she could sell. There's a lot of problems with it. And then a little bit down the line, I had written a new novel and I was querying it, so I sent it to her as well, and got a rejection. So we like had a few misses. Um, and then she had like reached out to me once. She had read what I've written. She had not found anything yet that she felt like would be a good project for us. But she reached out to me once and was like, "Hey, I found this illustrator who's doing fan art for like the BBC Merlin TV series." Um, and she's like, "I think this would make a really good graphic novel, like Arthurian legends with a gay romance." That was like the only premise line that she gave me.
Mm.
and just was like, I've read your work. I want to work with you as a writer. We haven't found the right project. I think this might be the one. Are you interested? So it was a very unusual way to get an agent because I hadn't yet like signed on with a manuscript, but because I had a personal relationship with her through working at an agency in the past, we kind of had that connection. And so at first I was a little bit like, I don't know the first thing about writing a graphic novel. I was very hesitant, but we all jumped on the phone. Um, Danielle had also reached out to Elle and said, "I found your art, and I'm really excited about it. I have a proposition, basically. Would you like to write this or illustrate a graphic novel?" So the three of us jumped on a call and just kind of brainstormed.
Mm.
We had several calls over the course of a few months, and it started off with like, are we going to do this project? And then, okay, Arthurian legends with a gay romance. Where do we want to go with this? And I kind of threw out, here are my favorite characters. We talked about like which characters would be fun to play with, which characters would audiences recognize. So like Lancelot is a character that most people know. I love Tristan dearly, and so I was like, I really want to have Tristan be one of the main characters in this story. Um, and then from there, it was like, okay, we have characters. Now we need a story. So I think I threw together like three or four kind of basically query letters that were like,
Mm.
here's one direction we could go. They were all completely different plot lines, completely different things, but I was like pulling from some of my favorite instances and tropes and stories that came from Arthurian legends. Be like, what if we did a spin on the Green Knight? What if we did a spin on, you know, Queen Mab? What if we did a spin on all these things? And I presented it to Danielle and Elle, and they told me what their favorite one was. And then from there, we went to the like writing a synopsis. So we kind of like built it in phases.
Mm.
Um, I was the main like storyteller behind the project, but I got a lot of editorial feedback and opinions from my agent and from my illustrator who like pitched their own ideas, wanted to throw in new characters. And so it was a very collaborative experience. But then I kind of put together the whole story once we had the pieces of the puzzle to like build with.
That is so interesting. So you worked very closely, I imagine, after the basic premise and the storyline were approved. Did you continue to work closely with Elle as she was illustrating? Because I haven't read your graphic novel yet, but I did flip through it, that
Mm-hmm.
early copy, and I noticed, like with many graphic novels, it wasn't just the speech bubbles and descriptions, but occasionally the words interact with the illustrations. So is that
Mm-hmm.
something that you talk about, or do you have some kind of note in your script for that, or really what is it like to have that continual collaboration with an illustrator?
Yeah. So I started with kind of a script. Once we had the whole synopsis written out, it was like scene by scene. Here's what the whole story is going to end up being. And everyone kind of had their own comments. And we once we finalized that, that's what went on submission. And then that's what ended up landing the book deal. So we had the synopsis, and Elle had done like three sample scenes. Um, so we had a little bit of experience working together as like author illustrator with me writing a little script of a single scene and Elle fully illustrating that scene.
Hmm.
Um, One of the first things we learned is I should write it like a movie script. I was looking at like all these templates for other comic scripts, and other writers for graphic novels will delineate page and panel. It'll be like page one, panel one, description, panel two, description. And I think that works for people who are like also artists, and so they know exactly what they're going to lay out with each panel.
Mhm.
Um, but I tried that, and then we realized that Elle has a way better idea of how this is going to lay out on the page. So I just wrote like scene one, full like action dialogue, and then Elle would determine how many pages it should be, how to lay it across panels, like what split panels and splash pages she would do. I was only writing action and dialogue. Um, and then Elle would kind of add in sound effects and things kind of as she saw fit. Um, and so there's kind of like a little bit of that balance of every once in a while I would write like a single sound effect because I felt like it was narratively important. But the majority of those were things that she added in to like complement her artwork. Um, Once it was sold and we had an editor on board, then I worked a lot more closely with the editor and we like wrote the whole script, finalized the script, and just handed the script over to Elle. And then she did the thumbnails, um, did like laid out the whole book, very rough sketches kind of thing. Um, and after she did all of the thumbnails for the entire thing, which was like 350 pages, uh, we both got on a call together and went through it panel by panel and made sure like everything made sense. So we worked very closely at the beginning phase, but then the further we went down the process, the more we kind of just like I would do a chunk of work, then Elle would do a chunk of work, and then we'd like talk about it for a little bit and then do like larger chunks.
So it seems like illustrating a scene would take a tremendous amount of time. I'm not an artist, I'm a writer, like
Mhm.
you, but, just putting in those reactions and some of the establishing shots where you're looking from far away, just all of those pieces seem like it would take a long time. What was the timeline? Was it pretty much what you expected, or was it longer?
It was longer. It was much longer. And we did sell it on proposal. So a big chunk of this time was spent me like writing the script. From like contract to publication was 4 years, which
That is
usually, yeah, it's it was a hefty period of time. So we sold this in the summer of 2020, and then it's releasing on June 4th, this year. So the process was a lot longer, but we also when you sell a novel with traditional publishing, usually you're handing a full manuscript to an editor, and the editor will do some editorial passes on it, but you already have a completed manuscript ready to go.
and even
But in
that can
this case,
take it takes a year minimum. It's very often
yeah,
2.
usually I would say like 2 years is your standard for traditional publishing, just because of all the steps that have to take place behind the scenes. Um, in this case, the first step was like actually write the script. And then the second step was the thumbnails. Um, and doing the thumbnails took a few months. Then
When you
after,
say thumbnails, sorry
Mhm.
to interrupt,
Yeah,
is that like a storyboard?
yes.
Okay, because that's what
Yeah.
I was picturing, and I wanted to make sure that I had the right thing in my head.
So we got the book ended up being about, I think it's now like 320 some pages. When we first laid it out, it was like 350, so it was a bit too long. Um, Elle did 7 large like blow ups of storyboarding with like tiny pages, just like rows of pages on these large, things. So it was kind of like in a movie, you're storyboarding out all the scenes. And it was just done in these tiny little these sketches. So that the thumbnails themselves, I think a lot of the big like layout of the process happens at thumbnail phase. Lots of erasing and redoing and relaying out and adding pages and deleting panels. Um, and then from there you go to the line art, and that's when you do like the actual full size page. And Elle was very detailed with like the line art and with the thumbnails. And so um, it took a lot of time with that, but I think we saved time because the line art was so detailed. We didn't have to like make a lot of changes with it. Um, but like all the line art, it took like several months to get that done. And then we got a contract to do full color, which is amazing. Not all graphic novels get to be printed in full color,
Hmm.
but that meant that there was another
Yeah.
several months dedicated to coloring every single page. So all told, it took about, I would say, 3 years of work plus the extra year of like production to put it all together and print it.
Wow. This of course isn't the only way to do graphic novels. Some people illustrate their own or like have you heard of other ways that people can, if they're interested in getting into graphic novels, other processes people have found to do it?
Yeah, so I love reading graphic novels and I love like seeing how other authors go about doing it. It's pretty cool when some people just start with a webcomic and they'll publish it online. There's certain like platforms like Webtoons or Tapas that they'll publish on.
Right. I love
And I've
webtoons.
seen,
I
oh,
got
I
super
love
into it.
it.
And
It's
I
so great.
generally don't read, comics, and before that I didn't read graphic novels, but it was definitely the gateway drug for me. It's
Oh yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, that was kind of the gateway drug for me too. And there's so many good like queer comics and stuff that's on Webtoons, which was kind of like my entry point as well. Um, and stuff like Heartstopper, that started as a webcomic. There's a lot of others. I don't know if I could think of the examples off the top of my head. Nimona was one that started as a webcomic by Noel Stevenson. Um, and that got turned into a Netflix movie. So highly recommend that one. Nimona is amazing. But so that's one way that people can kind of break into it is you start by just posting one page at a time on some kind of online platform. Every once in a while, they get big enough that a publisher takes notice. I've also seen like people who start off as like an author illustrator team, or if you are both, sometimes it's just one person who just writes and illustrates it. Those people are incredibly talented. I have no idea how they find the time to do all of it. Um, but they can start off with a proposal and like try to get an agent or a publisher excited about it just from that proposal artwork, which is a bit of how we ended up doing it. Our agent put it together, but then we got published on a proposal. Um,
And that
yeah,
proposal was not only a query letter, but also examples of the artwork, which
yes.
makes sense now that
So,
you say it, but it's not something that came to mind
right.
because it's something I've never done.
Yeah, our proposal was it was kind of the pitch, which was basically the query letter. It was the full synopsis that we had put together. Because we didn't have a full manuscript to give the publisher, we wanted to show them like this is the entire story, start to finish. And then we had three scenes that I think in total maybe 20 pages of like illustrated um, for the graphic novel, just fully illustrated. And only like three of those pages were colored. So we were kind of giving samples of like, this is what it would look like black and white with color gradient, full color. Um, and then we, I think, ended the proposal with like character sketches and stuff like concept art, just so that they would have an idea of like what this is going to look like when it's all said and done.
So, what advice would you give to someone besides what you've already said, which is really helpful? But what advice would you give to somebody who wants to break into graphic novels? Like that is the niche that they think really fits them. What would you say to them?
No, it's really difficult because from my experience, I feel like graphic novels mostly sell on artwork. So it's kind of hard to get somebody on board for a project on proposal alone. After we sold A Tale of Two Nights, I worked with my agent. We put together other graphic novel proposals that we put on submission. But we thought because we had heard a lot of editors say, like, you don't necessarily need an artist attached. Sometimes the publisher can get an artist on board. But in my experience, it didn't really work out. So we put together again a synopsis, the script pages for sample scenes, the pitch, all this stuff went on proposal, and just got a lot of rejections back. And a lot of those rejections were like, we don't really have an artistic vision for this. We don't know what it's going to look like. Can you attach an artist to this project? Um, so I think if you want to write graphic novels, you might need to start networking with artists. What I ended up doing for this second project that we haven't yet put on submission, so I can't really talk about it too much. I have no idea if it's going to get published. But we have a middle grade fantasy graphic novel idea. And I went to the Denver Fan Expo last year. and I walked up and down the rows of the, like, I think it's called Artist's Alley, like tables and rows upon rows of artists who have all of their artwork on display and are selling prints and all this stuff. So I like walked up and down the tables looking at artwork, just thinking like what art style would fit this graphic novel. And I found an artist and walked up to them and was like, "Hey, I love your artwork. Are you interested in doing graphic novels?" And I pitched the graphic novel idea, and they were excited by it. So I connected them to my agent. My agent basically said, "Here's how this industry works. Like, are you on board?" And now they're doing the sample art for a new submission for this. So I think if I like for future graphic novels that I do, I think it's really important to get an artist whose style really clicks with the story that you want to tell. So Elle's style for A Tale of Two Nights is like very kind of anime-esque inspired. This really gorgeous kind of like show a little bit of like what it looks like on the inside. The like gorgeous full color kind of scene stuff. Um, and this new project that we're working on is middle grade. So we wanted kind of like rounder, softer, squishier characters, a little bit like cuter, kind of Disney Pixar-esque feel or like a Studio Ghibli kind of feel to it. So finding an artist whose style meshes with the story you want to tell, and then reach out and see if they want to collaborate.
Yeah, it's the whole you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, Wayne
Yeah,
Gretzky, Michael Scott, right?
exactly.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah, I didn't really think about that Artist Alley,
It's a
approach.
great resource. It's like right there.
That was bold, but I like it. It sounds like it's working out for
Yeah,
you. So, yeah, best of luck with that book
thank you.
on submission. And so now how can people find you and your work if they want to get Tale of Two Nights?
Yeah, so I guess by the time that this video publishes, the book will be out. So it should be available in like any of your local bookstores. You can get it on Amazon. And then I'll also be at the Denver Fan Expo this year. So if you happen to be there, you can come find my table and I'll be selling copies there as well with some extra swag and stickers and things like that. Um, and then you can find my Instagram is at JP Persichetti, which I'm assuming you'll be able to learn how to spell that from
I
the
will
video
put the link
description.
down below so you don't need to
Yeah,
don't need to
complicated
worry.
name.
You can just copy and paste.
But yeah, I'm most active on Instagram, so you can connect with me there. And then my website, jamespersichetti.com as well.
All right, well, perfect. Thank you so much for letting me pick your brain and ask you all these questions about the whole world of graphic novels. I love that they seem at least to be picking up in popularity, at least in the world
Oh
of
yeah.
me. So it's a fun, newer frontier for people who might not have considered that option otherwise.
Yeah, and one thing I'll kind of add with that is that graphic novels is kind of the Wild West of publishing right now. Novels are very like, this is what your word count should be, this is how you write a query letter. Graphic novels, publishers don't have set processes like in place. So there's so many different ways to do it. You can take my advice, you can look up other people who have done it, but it is a new frontier. So like try whatever you think it's going to work for you, try new things. There's so many different ways to go about doing it.
Well, thank you for spending this afternoon with me. If you liked this interview, then make sure to subscribe for more content like this. Like this video if you like it, and don't forget to pick up A Tale of Two Nights by James Persichetti. There it is. Um, so until next time, bye.
Thank you so much.